recording, and then I'm going to...
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Janice Presley, and I'm really excited to be here with each one of you today for our building series, particularly for people who work in HR or those who want to be in HR. And we're going to continue from last week's discussion. And last week we started a dialogue about, do you trust HR? So I'm really excited to be here. Before we get to the topic, I do want to give you some general housekeeping ideas. First things first, we are recording. It is also on Facebook Live. So if you have access to Facebook and you want to share this with your Facebook community, feel free to do so. Also, we will be looking in the chat box for any kind of comments or questions that you would like to pose to us, and we will be addressing those as the session goes on. We will leave time at the end of today's session for any kind of questions that any of you may have. And we also want to announce a couple things that are coming up. So we plan to have a session like this each week, typically with a different topic. So I want you to save the date for August the 5th, which is also next week. We are having the SHRM Black Chapter Presidents in our midst, and we want them to talk a little bit about SHRM and the benefits of being involved with the SHRM organization. And for those of you who may not be familiar with SHRM, SHRM stands for the Society for Human Resource Managers, and they have local chapters around the U.S. as well as chapters internationally. On August the 12th, we will be hosting a series on diverse recruiting practices. So those of you who are recruiters or have the responsibility for recruiting or just want to know more about the recruitment function, we're going to be having that particular panel, and I actually am going to be one of the people that's going to be talking about how you can attract and retain candidates of color in every aspect of your particular organization. And then on August the 17th, we're going to be having another session, and this one is about starting your own HR consulting organization. So there are a lot of people who do HR by day, and they have aspirations of starting their own companies. And so this will be a really good opportunity for you to take part of that particular session and learn more about how to do that. Before we move on, I would like to read a disclaimer. The information provided during the session today should not be considered legal advice. We are encouraging each of you to consult legal counsel as it pertains to your particular situation. And so today we have some HR experts that I'd like to introduce you to. I'm going to introduce them first, have them do a little hello, and then we're going to come back and have them give you more details about who they are and what their responsibilities are. So first we have Areta Yancey, who's our host for today. Hello. And she specializes in human resources consulting and is based in Los Angeles.
Hello.
Okay, and our second speaker we have today is Ms. Ayanna Webster. She's an international speaker and organizational culture coach, and she resides in Kansas City, Missouri.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here.
So again, thank you so much for participating today and also for that brief introduction. So what I'd like to do is go back to Areta and have you take a few minutes just to talk about your organization, what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll follow that up immediately with Ayanna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. We have some really key and practical points that we want to share. And this is a space for HR professionals. So we want you to continue to be engaged and be involved. Give us your questions. That's what this is all about. I'm the owner of Mann HR Consulting Group, and we range from doing HR implementations in small businesses to small HR projects. And so I've actually just recently taken on a project which I'm calling IDEA, which gives us an end-to-end implementation of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So I'm excited about rolling that out.
All right, Ayanna.
So hello again, I'm Ayanna Webster, and I've been in HR for about the last 15 years in various capacities. Started mostly in learning and development and moved over into engagement culture space. I run my own company. It's called Winning Within and Associates, and we specialize in organizational development, culture, and climate assessments. And so our goal is really to help you show up to a winning workplace every single day. So we love what we do.
Okay, oh great. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Janice Presley. I have also been working in the HR space for about 25 years, mostly as an HR generalist, but I would say some of the things I'm really passionate about are recruiting, as well as manager engagement and education. So really excited to have both of you here today. We want to go through some of the comments that we got from the last time, as well as answer some of the questions that were left over from last week. I thought we had a really lively discussion going. And so again, if you're on the call or you are watching live, please make sure that you put your questions into the chat box so that we can make sure that we take care of those. So Ayanna, I have a question. So when we're interviewing as HR people, we tend to use behavioral questions, kind of tell me about a time when. And so as an HR professional, I want to ask you a question. So tell me about a time when you had to make a tough ethical decision where leadership was asking you to do something or agree with the decision that was made.
That's a good one. It makes me think back to when I started doing culture work. As I said, I initially started in learning and development, and my very first culture job was doing an engagement survey for a pretty small company that I worked for. And we were really excited. The CEO was excited. Our HR director was excited about the fact that we were going to enlist a company to come in and help us to do an engagement survey online. And so we went through that entire process. And once the engagement survey results were back, I went to my HR director and shared those results with her. Well, unfortunately, the results, what they hoped they would be based off of how, of course, individuals were feeling about their manager, the work environment, their career development. And so the next day I was supposed to go and present those findings to our entire staff. What I'll share with you is our CEO, once she learned what the results said to me, "You can't share that. You can't share the results. I want to go in. I want to be able to tell you exactly what you need to say." And what she wanted me to say, Janice, was not what we had heard from the people. Wow. And so when you say, tell me about a time when, I had to make the decision as to whether or not in that situation, I was going to take the information that I had gotten, the data, and stand up in front of my peers and share what was really happening, or I was going to take the direction of my senior leader who was saying, we're going to tell a different narrative. So what did I do? I made the decision at a very young age that if she wanted to share the data in a way that was not going to give an accurate picture of the organization, she needed to do that herself. And so what that took was, on my end, I think a lot of integrity. I think when we think about how we show up and how we behave in the workplace, it took a lot of integrity. It also took really a lot of gumption to be able to stand up to my senior leader and say, if you want to tell a story that's not the true picture, you have to do that yourself. And so when I think about how this can apply to all of us, it goes back to, again, what I talk about in my organization, values. And so what do you value? And for me, a part of that was the truth, and not being able to stand up and tell the truth was not something that I was willing to do. So she gave the results herself.
Wow. Did she give the real results or did she give the fake results?
She absolutely gave the fake results, which brings us back to the importance of having an external individual come in and being able to do that evaluation of the company and share that feedback. So it goes right back to one of the reasons why I'm in a consulting capacity today, to help people like myself who find themselves in a situation like that.
Yeah, a lot of times as HR people, we may be asked to do things that are out of our, what we feel comfortable with. And I've seen situations where some people have folded. They didn't have the managerial courage to stand up to the leader. And because of that, they found themselves either unemployed or they ended up resigning, which is kind of bad. And so I think one of the things that, is sort of like anything else, how there's a code of ethics for medical doctors that says, I will do no harm. I feel like it's the same kind of thing with us in HR, is that we will do no harm, that we will do the right thing by people. And not saying that everybody operates under the same code of ethics, but again, I believe that we should operate the same way. Feretta, did you have something to add?
I agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually had that same scenario. It was actually a client of mine, though. And the client had asked me, so when we did an engagement survey, and at the end of the survey, we gave the employees an opportunity to list, it was open-ended questions, tell me what you like about the organization, tell me a couple of things that you see as opportunities, things that you want to change.
Right.
And so we give raw feedback to the client.
Hmm.
And she said to me, well, can we just take out the good things, the positive comments, and
Okay.
not, share the other comments? And I, gave her that same response. Is as far as the integrity of the data, we want to maintain that.
Hmm.
And I think it's a way to, anytime that I'm giving data anyway, I always like to have, an explanation, and never just give out, raw data. But I think that that was an opportunity for that company to, and it's the funny part is, the negative data was around communication, and the employees were saying that they were,
Mm.
you know, that they didn't appreciate the way that were not communicated, or so again, it's building trust, right? I mean, that's what we're
Yep.
talking about, is how do we continue to build trust when we're putting those situations? Who do we have to support us to make the right decisions?
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I've been in situations, but not so much like that. And then in my case, I needed to do something different. So I made the choice that this was not the place for me at that particular point in time. And so I needed to start looking, and that's what I did. Because again, everybody is not necessarily equipped to fight the giant, may not want to.
Yes.
And so again, you just have to decide what it works for you and what value it is to you as an individual. Okay.
Right.
So there's also been several comments, and one of the things that you all both alluded to was management. And so a lot of times you hear employees in an organization, and they say, well, what are the problems? They say, oh, it's management. Everything is management. And so there's a lot of, kind of tension sometimes between employees and their either immediate managers or employees and the leadership within organization. And according to research, 57% of the people who quit their jobs, they specifically do it because of the relationship with their immediate manager. And so the question is, how can HR support managers? And so I just wanted to kind of start off a little bit with that. So a lot of times people are in roles as leaders or managers in a company because they're very good at the craft that they do. So if they work in operations, they're a very good operator. If they are a marketing person, they're a really good marketing person. They've got great ideas. They can use the software, the whole nine. However, that doesn't necessarily make them a good leader or manager of people, especially if they don't have the skills. They've not done it before. They've been an individual contributor, meaning that they've had, job responsibilities where they were being responsible for things themselves. And then to make that leap to now lead people or manage people, they struggle. And they struggle really bad. And so as HR people, one of the things that when we're talking about the concept of succession planning, which is basically who's going to be the next leader, who's going to be the next manager, who's going to be the next director, vice president, etc., you have to think about the people who are in place as a great practitioner of whatever their skill or craft is, but think about what do they need in order to quote unquote lead other people, to manage a team, etc. And most times they need skills. And in order to get the skills, it's going to take HR as well as others in the leadership of the organization to kind of put a growth path for the person. And maybe that a year from now you want XYZ person to be a manager, and so you put things in their path from a development standpoint to help them become a leader. So if they've never supervised people before, maybe you have them manage a team while the real manager is on vacation. So they're responsible for attending all the meetings, doing the job assignments, disbursement of duties, et cetera, and you kind of gradually build them up. But what happens in most organizations is people find out, oh, tomorrow, boom, you're promoted, now you're the manager, and you expect them to lead. And most people that are thrown into that have no real skill set or ability to lead and manage others because they've not had the opportunity before. And so that's when you think about new college graduates. And I was talking with Beretta about this. As a new college graduate, I graduated from college. I had managed, groups of people on college campuses. And now my very first job was I was supposed to manage a team of 6 women who were all in their 60s and ready to retire. And their attitude toward me was, little girl, sit down. You don't know what you're doing. You're 22 years old and we know what we're doing and you don't. So you need to learn from us. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, was to really get to know them, understand what their day-to-day responsibilities, and then ask them how I could help them. And that's what helped me be a leader or a manager of people who didn't need managing. Again, they knew the job, they knew what they were supposed to do. I was really there as a quote unquote, my first job of managing a team. And so I say all that to say is, when you are positioning people to lead or to manage teams, just make sure that they have some level of skill set. There are all kinds of online trainings that they can do, classes they can do, experiences that they can have that have really helped to position them for opportunities going forward. Veretta, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so are you saying that it is okay for HR professionals right now, generalists, managers, to look at their workforce and start to put a succession plan? So we recognize it in many of the senior executive roles, right? Succession plan is in place.
Right.
But when you think about the younger, especially in operations and, junior roles, there typically isn't a formal succession plan in place, right?
Right.
So are you saying that this is an opportunity for HR professionals to kind of see that as a actually something to add to their own performance?
Yes.
To put a plan together so that they can anticipate those roles that may be at risk to losing a manager, or managers may be going on leave, and that to have a plan in place and to start to train those people in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a bulk of my career was in the retail space. And I would tell you, we did that all the time, mostly because the operations that I was responsible for were 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were closed 1 day a year, and that was on Christmas Day. And so because of that, we needed to always have people ready. Somebody was going out on maternity leave. Somebody was, wanting to go on vacation. Somebody was, in a car accident or whatever. And we needed to have people who were ready to step up. And so we would call them like next generation of leaders. And so because retail primarily at the time was predominantly male oriented, I did that for a lot of our promising female employees, kind of put a plan together. Some of the things were individual to them. Maybe a person who didn't feel comfortable with speaking, part of their individual development plan would include things like, you need to go to Toastmasters so you get more comfortable with speaking in front of other people, while others you needed to understand the concept of retail math. And retail math is not the same as just doing math that you do in school, but it's a different, process, because you're looking at cost and everything. And then there were certain different trainings that we could offer to that person, whether it was online training, face-to-face training, spending time with a mentor, assigning a mentor to that person, letting them be the manager for the day to see the obstacles and kind of understand what their strengths and weaknesses were, and then putting a plan together to do that. And that's really the role of HR with their leader, to actually put a plan together for every employee. Now, there are some employees who have no interest in moving up, and they will tell you, I like being a whatever, I want to stay in this role for the rest of my life, I don't want to do anything else, don't ask me to lead because that's not something I want to do. And that's okay too. You don't want to lead anybody, but guess what? You're not going to always be in this role for whatever reason. So my ask of you would be, as an employee, hey, will you take so-and-so under your wing and teach them your job, because they do have aspirations of being a whatever. And we know that you have a particular skill set that's going to help that person be successful. And 99% of the time, the person would say, yes, I have no problem with doing that. I'm okay with doing that. And so if every organization does that and thinks about how you're going to position people for the next level, the next opportunity, then you're not not scrambling, because if your best lead or your best manager, your best supervisor, or your best worker leaves, who is the person that's going to take their place? Because either they're being recruited by another organization, they're being, they may pass away, they may get, a lot of ifs can happen. And so you just really need to be always prepared of who is your next level group that you're going to be taking to at every level. And it's down from the hourly employee up to the executive. Who's the next person, so that you're not, caught basically with your pants down because you don't have anybody to take their place.
Right.
And I do want to jump in and say succession planning is definitely important. But when you talk about if they leave, I want to make sure we underscore that retention is a part of that as well. And so we know that, according to Gallup, 80% of the variance on employee engagement is the manager. And so to that first question that you asked about, is it really about the manager? Gallup has a book that came out last year that's called It's the Manager. And so when we think about the retention, if you're going to have a succession plan, you have to be able to retain your employees. Absolutely. And the way that you do that is through the manager, because the workforce of today, employees are concerned about my job, my manager, my team, my development. And you know who has an impact on all of those things? The manager. The manager sets the team culture. The manager helps me understand my job. The manager works with me on my development. So if we're going to retain people for succession, we do have to make sure that we're upskilling our managers. And really that first skill that I always talk about is in people skills and being able to translate the organizational values and once again, the culture to each of the individuals to keep them at the organization so that they can be a part of that succession plan.
Right.
Correct.
And one of the suggestions that I have actually given to an organization when we're talking about people not necessarily performing in a job and having the manager, to give that performance review that's not, a negative review. One of the things that I suggested was to have managers to switch out. And then you can really see, is a performance based on the actual work or issues that the manager's having with the employees. And it's unfortunate, but we have to be real and recognize this happens. It happens where people don't get along, where people, whether it's unconscious bias, whether it's, you offended me, it could be something very petty, and it could start to fester and develop into something really big. So that's one of the things that if the company is large enough and you have, especially in operations where you may have the manager, that skill set can be done, across several teams to start to switch up. And then that allows HR insight, especially the HR VPs. They can really go in and see what's going on in the organization and do some investigation, I would say.
Okay. And I was going to say also, so I'm actually starting a new role on Monday. And in this particular role that I'm starting, I have a group of direct reports. And so as a new leader going into an existing team, it's going to be very important. And I'll just kind of talk about my strategy, because I think it's going to be really important to whoever might be on this call or hears the call later. So as a new leader going into a new team, my first week, I have a series of meetings set up with my direct reports as well as the people that are in operations with the organization. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing is listening a lot, taking a lot of notes, and then just kind of understanding the strengths and where the opportunities are for each person on my team. And I'll be getting feedback from the leadership across the organization, because they'll say, yeah, so-and-so, needs help with this or whatever. And then when I'm presenting my plan back to my team in terms of how I'm going to move forward with them as a team, it's going to really help me to upscale my team. What I mean by that is this. If, for example, I have one person or two people that are responsible for recruitment as part of the HR function, and I have a person who's never done recruiting before, doesn't know anything, I'm going to pair them up with my best recruiter. Why? Because I want to upscale my team. I want to make sure that everybody knows everything. So if there is a vacancy on my team, we're not going to skip a beat. we're not going to skip a beat, because somebody can automatically pick it up. So everybody's going to become an expert. So even if you're not an expert in recruiting, but you're an expert in benefits, for example, guess what? You're going to become an expert in benefits. A lot of that was going to be driven by the person's interest, because I might talk to them and they say, I've been doing, recruiting all this time, and I want to learn about compensation. I want to learn about benefits, whatever that might be. But then I'm also going to have an area of assignment, so that I always have another person that can pick up if that person, leaves, or whatever could happen. And so again, just really thinking about succession planning on my own team is very relevant to this, because I've led teams before. And so again, if you are a new leader, or even if you haven't done any of the things before, and you have an existing team and it's chaos and confusion, one of the ways you can get your team back on track is by giving people an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn. And now those are the things that are going to help with the retention piece, because if you're a manager that doesn't care and let people go nilly-willy, then guess what? They're not going to stay, because they're going to say, well, I've been doing this job for 5 years and I'm not growing, I'm not learning. But if you continue to challenge your people on your team and help them grow and learn and understand, those are the things that are really going to help them be successful.
One thing that I want to say is, and just to really expand this topic, because I think it's a great one, especially when you think about HRBP and really the reputation for HR as being strategic partners. And so this gives us that forward thinking, and it allows you, as you start to go into the organization, to know not just about the operations and what you do and what you sell and how you make money, but also to understand the people and really knowing who are those top performers, right? So that you can start positioning things, and so that when things happen in the organization, you're not, it doesn't come to you by surprise. You already have a plan. You've already anticipated that this was going to happen, and now you have a solution right away that you can present. Even though you may not be the final decision maker, you show at least, this is what I was thinking, this is what I would recommend, and you can go from there.
Correct. All right, so let's move on to another topic, and this is for you, Loretta. A statement was made that if an employee goes to HR with a complaint, will they truly investigate or just go with the word of the manager?
Right. This probably should have gone to Ayana, because it has to do about, it's the culture. Mm-hmm. It's it truly is the culture. And it still goes back to what the managers were saying, and perception. Remember, back in the day, I know I'm dating myself, by making that statement, but perception is the reality. And so if people feel, if you've seen this, I saw this on Facebook, this posting. If you see this, people genuinely feel that I can go to HR and it doesn't matter, because they're not going to listen to me. Their investigations are not going to be fair. And the way that I think about that, though, is if you have the same people who have come into an organization, so let's just talk about the, unconscious bias issue, right? Mm-hmm. Those systems have been in place long before many of the employees are in the workplace today, right? And so you've basically adopted a culture that's already there. You've come into an organization, and now you're expected to try to change the culture in the organization. And I don't think that it's, yes, we can tie, certain things to performance reviews, and we can kind of force people to do it. But a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of this trust, is really a change of heart. And it's really having people do what they say that they're going to do in an organization. And when they make the statements around, whether it's diversity, inclusion, whether it's, hiring practices, whether it's fairness, and I could go off on, I could literally go on a tangent about equity versus fairness, right? Because sometimes I don't want equal. Sometimes I just want fair, And so, but I don't expect everybody to know what that means. And so to answer your question, I just believe that you have to go through a organizational development, change management. And I know these are some buzzwords, but they work. I think people have to be aware, they have to have a plan, and they have to, everybody start marching towards those same plans. And you have to realize that people aren't just going to trust you, just wake up and say, oh, we're just going to trust HR. They're just going to automatically do it. And I will say this, just bringing in an African American person, leader, executive into the organization is still not going to get people to, that light switch goes on, oh, well, today the light bulb's gone off, we're going to trust HR. Because
Yeah.
what's happened is, again, when you talk about a system, you're talking about something that's been there, processes that help. The way the systems are designed is so that they can support processes. If a process breaks down, the system is still going to work. And so
Right.
all of those things have to be broken down and rebuilt together in order for people to start feeling their authentic selves, feeling like it's okay for me to share with HR what has happened to me. And as you can recall, when they started talking about the Me Too movement, how many women and sometimes men felt, I can't go and I can't share this. They're not going to believe me because they're made into a victim. And so you'll start to see some of those things happen as people start to unpack what it means to be not just to have a diverse workplace, but also have a place of inclusion where people feel like their contributions are valued, and not just valued, welcomed, solicited, brought to the table. I can't tell you how many times in my career where I found out about meetings because I was looking on somebody else's calendar to schedule a meeting.
Right.
And so that's, that's unfortunate, but we don't have to be there today. So I think that there's that perception is still there. HR will have to start that process of communicating. So if you are HR if you're in an organization and you have a fantastic HR and you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, communicate that. Share those wins. Don't keep that a secret. Let people know. Pat yourself on the back and be your own cheerleaders. Especially as you think about, and again, this is me going into the operation side. When you think about when people are doing town halls, right? And they're bringing everybody together, and you see all of the business units giving their slides and giving their, wins. And then HR mainly comes in with some numbers and some stats and, but I think there's an opportunity for HR to talk about some wins, talk about some of that, those changes that you're making, and have some of the employees genuinely share their feedback about how, a situation turned around for them. But I can't say it enough. Use external resources to help you. This isn't one. I would say that I have become a good consultant because I worked with Accenture, which I'll say their name, but I worked very close with that company with a group of consultants for many years on different projects. And so that's how I was able to develop my craft. And so I don't, suggest anybody taking on any of this alone. Grab, an outsourcing agency and helping you develop this and define this based on your own culture, what's going on with you today. And that's what, we specialize in customizing solutions, right? Just for that organization. It's not a one stop fits all. This is going to be some work. So I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so there is a question in the chat box, and I'm going to answer a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ayana. And it says, in a company or an institution where employee morale is low and not a priority, the workplace culture can become toxic. How and when does HR step in? And so I will tell you that in a prior role that I was in, we had a very toxic work environment. So much so that the turnover rate was probably 200% because people were just tired of it. And they kept saying, well, it's the managers, and the managers would say it's the employees. And it was like the management team spent all day listening to employee complaints, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as the HR leader for that particular organization, I actually reached out to our employee assistance program. Come to find out that our employee assistance program, as part of the package we had with them, not only did they offer group trainings for all the employees, and we divided up the employees and had them go through training in small groups of like 20. So we're talking about a 200 employee organization. So we literally had back-to-back trainings like for a few weeks when we brought in this consultant. But we also had an opportunity that the EAP brought to us, was an opportunity for conflict resolution between managers and employees. And so what we were able to do was, for the employees that were always complaining about my manager did, my manager said, etc., or employee did, employee said, we actually had kind of a mediator. And so the EAP provided a mediator that would sit down, kind of outline what some of the issues were on both sides, meet with either them individually, and then bring the two people together. That's not necessarily my skill set. And so that's where I use an outside resource with our EAP to bring in and to help. And I will tell you that not only did the training help, but also those one-on-one meetings helped also, because what we realized is that in most cases it was a misunderstanding. So the employee would say, well, I put my vacation request in and they didn't approve it, or they said no, whatever, and the manager just said no, but the manager didn't explain the why. And the reality was the vacation was disapproved, not because the manager didn't like the employee, which is what the employee thought, but it was because there were too many other people off on the same day. But had the manager communicated with the employee to let the employee know that that was the situation and it wasn't something personal, then we probably wouldn't have had to go with this whole mediation thing. But again, that's one case where that particular was a great solution to kind of help that particular team, to be better, do better. And then in the other cases with the same team, we had to do some management changes. There were some people who, were contributing to the toxic work environment, so they couldn't stay. And so again, just knowing when to call it quits and knowing when to ask people to step aside, step down, etc., to kind of help fix the problem. And those were just some of the things. And I know, Ayana, you probably have something to add. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ira, to your question, toxicity is something that you can feel. You can feel when morale is low. You can feel when people are in a place where they don't enjoy coming to work. Not only can you feel it, but likely you're hearing about it or you hear about it in the workplace. And so your question around when should HR step in? Absolutely, they should, because when you think about low morale, you're talking about productivity is going to be impacted by that. Retention is going to be impacted by that, as well as profits are going to be impacted by that. And so, what I say to HR individuals is you have to address it, understanding that there are subcultures. So you might have an organization that's completely toxic. It may be, to Janice's point, may be teams, or it may be a particular department or division. The way that, I think HR should proceed, and what I do specifically in my consulting practice is ensure feedback. So we do assessments because we do want to be able to, again, understand the employee voice and how they're experiencing the culture. So feedback is important, as well as being upfront and honest and communicating back with employees, even at the department level, what you heard, what from that feedback, and holding that manager, those teams accountable for action planning around the opportunity. So we heard that this team does not work well together, or we don't have role clarity, then the manager has that responsibility to action plan around that. And as a result of not having role clarity, we are in conflict with each other all the time. So we want to make an action plan around that so that we can move the needle there. And Janice talked about EAP. We provide this service in my organization, or your HR function may have an OD, or talent management function that can work with that manager on holding them accountable for the action plan that was put in place, so that you can look for those measurable changes. And so, in short, you got to be able to get the feedback. You got to be able to hear it. You got to be willing to share it. You got to be willing to take action around it, and then hold people accountable for changing the culture, which is really about changing the behaviors that are acting the culture. So HR absolutely should step in. To me, HR should have their finger on the pulse. They should know where the fires are. They should know where the flames are. And HR, depending on, again, the size of the company, I understand that some people are a one-stop shop, right? And they can't do all of that. They need to also, however, be reaching out, like Janice said, to EAP or consultants, because at the end of the day, my first point was it's going to impact profits, retention, and productivity. And so with that in mind, HR definitely should step in, and there are some ways that they can do that.
Loretta, do you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna say yes to everything Ayana said. You as well, Janice, covered a lot of the points. I'm one of those. Let's get down to the source of it. So let's go do a deep dive. Let's figure out what it is. Let's understand many cases in toxic environments you have where there's a perception of this person is getting away with something. There's perception of, you know, this person, they don't hold everybody accountable, or they're not treating everybody the same. And so figure out what it is to get to the bottom of it. And I do, like Ayana, I do the focus, the surveys, the assessments, but I also do focus groups. And I make sure when I do my focus groups that I have the loudest mouths in the room. And that way I can get a full picture. So not just having those that may, you know, be more clear, more, you know, leaders, but also bringing in people who are, you know, just the regular hourly employees, you know, bringing in a mix of everybody within the organization and getting their feedback and having them to work the plan, having them to come up and solve some of the problems, and having them to communicate. Because you know, you know this, when you get to the person with the largest, you know, the biggest voice, right, and you can convince that person, right, then you know that your message is starting to come across throughout the organization. And I think that that's is important. The other thing, and I know that, you know, companies have, you know, have problems with this, but you have to sometimes cut your losses. You have to be able to say, if I allow
Yes.
this toxic environment to continue to fester, and then it's going to blow up, it's not just the productivity and the people working in the place, in the space, but it's also their health. And so you're getting it in your benefits plan. I mean, it's really that 80-20, you know, rule that people talk about, where you have 80% of the people or 80% of the behaviors, the negative behaviors, are 20% of the people are actually doing those things. And so sometimes you have to just say, you know what, that's what the PIP is for. But I do think that, you know, for HR to really look at that process and make sure that the PIP process is fair, and making sure that you are identifying the right people to put on those plans, and not to necessarily have the plan for some populations to rehabilitate them and get them back into the organization, and then for other populations to use it to get them out of the organization. So I know I opened up something there, but I,
Yeah.
that's what
I
I do
think,
sometimes.
and I think the other thing that I did not say is, even before we went to the EAP, it was because of a bunch of like town hall meetings, feedback, suggestion box ideas. And that was one of the things that I turned over to the EAP, because that's what they asked for. They said, before we can do anything, we want to see what kind of results you've had, your surveys. And so unlike the manager that Ayana talked about earlier, I had to share the good, the bad, and the ugly in order for us to devise a plan on what will work for our particular team. And it was tough, and it also cost us money to do it. So we had to, basically close the business down for a couple of days so that we could get people, to get the training going. We did the action plans. We formed small groups to work on, the topic of their choice of what they wanted to do. And it took everybody. It couldn't just be the leadership doing it. It takes
Exactly.
as leaders. And again, if you've got a leader that's not willing to invest to make their team get better, then they probably are not the right leader. The same thing with employees. If you got employees that just refuse to do right, then they're not the right employees either. So I think the part of it is, for any kind of change to happen, it's definitely going to take a team effort. It's not an individual effort. It's not HR alone. HR might lead the charge, but everybody has to buy in order for everybody to win.
Right. You know what? And,
And
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would underscore, and I do just want to underscore, Beretta, that if you are in a toxic culture that is impacting your health, I say you should leave, because you can't be in a toxic culture if you're dead. So if it's impacting your health, absolutely, all the surveys, all of the feedback, all the accountability in the world isn't going to make you healthy. And so I've seen in the age of COVID, a lot of individuals saying, you know what, deuces, I am out. I can't do this anymore. And, I applaud them. I know that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of faith. But at the end of the day, our health is always going to be first and foremost.
Absolutely. All right, so there's a question in the chat.
Let me just say one more thing too. The other point that I want to make is that this is during this time right now, and we call it uncertainty. This could really catapult some of the organizations in this space, because now you're having where people are sharing how they really feel. So organizations aren't going, well, I really can't read them and I really don't know what's going on. There's a lot of post surveys that are out there. Employees are now being more transparent than ever and sharing how they feel about the organization. And so I think this is a great time for the organization to start to think about some of the very small things that they can do. One is that, when employees say, I need to take off tomorrow, you don't have to ask, them to write a dissertation about why they need to take off. Like, just give them the day off, and if they're in if you're in a, operations environment, manufacturing or a place like that, put a room there, give people a space, almost like a nursing area, where you can go and take a break, get a breather, just something, doing something simple like that, and giving people a place to just walk away and take a deep breath is a benefit. So that's just what I want to say. So HR, start to be creative about what you can do to help those environments and help people, especially with the essential workers. And be creative. So what if you've never seen it before? So what if it's not in the SHRM methodology? Go for it, try it. Don't spend a year trying to plan something. Do a little bit of something and just start, and then just say, be honest, we don't know, we want to try this, we think it's going to work for this group, let's try it. Pilots, tests, all of those things, they are still crucial. So if you want to try something new, call it a pilot.
Got it. All right, so I want to go to there's a question in the chat box, and it says, I work in a company that's traditionally white, and at the very beginning of their D&I journey, diversity and inclusion journey, when I asked my manager for feedback, I received personal criticisms. I'm not authentic, I dress too professional, I speak too proper or too corporate, versus constructive measured feedback about my actual deliverables or work. To me, this goes against the very definition of diversity. How do I handle this situation? And I know that Ayana was chomping at the bit, ready.
No. Okay. No, I want to yield to you ladies first and foremost.
Okay. So I would tell you that very early in my career, I worked for a manager who was basically out to get me. And I don't say that lightly, because he actually verbalized that to my teammates, because I was the only person of color on the team, and he verbalized that. And I had just graduated from college, the same group where I had the 6 women, the same group. And so this particular manager went to my coworkers and told them, she thinks she knows too much. I'm about to show her how much she doesn't know. And so every day was a test. Every day I went to battle, and I went to battle with my manager. And he did little things to kind of sabotage me. Like, for example, sending text messages at midnight to let me know that there was a meeting at 7 a.m. when he knew that I didn't come to work till 8. So when I came to work at 8 o'clock, he was basically chastising me about not being at work on time, for example. And so I lived on the edge. And because I was 22, just out of college, I took it because I did not want to give the embarrassment by calling my parents and say, Mom and Daddy, I got fired. I've lost my job or whatever. And so at 22 years old, I did not handle that particular situation very, very well. I did everything that I could to get away from him as a manager, up to the point where every time I applied for another job, he would tell the hiring manager that I was not ready, that I was immature, and all these negative things about me, which were not true, because he was trying to keep me tied to the desk that I was at. And then finally, I outsmarted him. And I went to the hiring manager and I said, this person is not going to let me go. And I'm going to give you very honest feedback. So no matter what they say, I can show you what I do on a day-to-day basis, etc. And then when the manager called and said, I want to offer Janice a job, and he went through his whole spiel about, well, she's horrible, she's this, she's the other. His response to him was, I don't care, I want her on my team. And then when he found out that he lost, he came back to me and he basically told me in no uncertain terms that you think that you've done something, but I just want you to know that you will never have a career with this organization because you defied me. So I've lived that battle with a crazy manager. Now I'm a grown woman. So as a grown woman, I probably would have gone to my HR department. I would have gone over that manager and basically voiced my concerns about what was going on at the time. But again, at 22, I didn't know that there was an advocate for me somewhere within the organization. But again, I didn't move forward because I didn't know what to do. So part of my advice would be to find your trusted HR person. If you don't have a trusted HR person, a lot of companies have what they call tip lines, or what we used to call them anonymous lines, where you can call and report someone. And you can do it anonymously and kind of talk about it, and you can do it in third person, that I'm aware of, XYZ happening to this particular employee, but I definitely would reach out for help. And even if that manager, and most companies have a policy against retaliation, and retaliation means that even if you report them, they're not supposed to come back after you, like all of the retaliation that I got, early on in my career. So that would be my advice, to one, let somebody know, go above them. And if there was no one above them, again, where I am right now, he or she would get my resignation letter after I found another job, but I will be looking for another opportunity.
So let me chime into this one. So one, I'm a numbers person, you guys. So I'm always going to go to the numbers. Mm-hmm. And when you think about the U.S. population, we're less than 13% African Americans, right? Mm-hmm. So most of the time, it's always going to be a high percentage of whites in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So we know that, right? The other thing is, my daughter used to figure skate. And one of the things that she typically was the only African-American figure skater. I think maybe once or twice she competed against another African-American. Well, one of the things about that sport is that it had a lot to do with people's opinions, right? It was, so they would watch a performance and they would rate you on, what they saw or what they thought. Subjective. It was based on their opinions. When you think about another sport like basketball or football, volleyball, those sports, it doesn't matter what somebody feels about that player. It doesn't matter, what that player has on, what they've done with their hair. None of those things matter, because once that ball goes into that basket, nobody can deny it. Right. And so what I always do is I take my job description and I make it very clear on metrics. Mm-hmm. And we agree on those SMART goals. And so when I'm asking for feedback, I'm not going to ask you for general feedback. I don't want general feedback.
Right.
I want you to tell me how you feel I'm measuring against my goals. And guess what? These goals are measurable.
Right.
And I always encourage people to write their own goals, because then you have the advantage of being able to measure against those goals. If
Correct.
you allow other people to write your goals for you, then their aspirations, or what they expect you to accomplish, may not be fulfilled. But you can legitimately, honestly say, yes, I can do this in 3 weeks. I can do this in 5 months. And then anytime you have additional assignments, then you add that as an addition. And that's where you get the performance bonuses, right? So that's that additional spend that they have to be able to give you for a higher performance. And
Right.
so I would say never be discouraged in taking it personally, but take it as okay, this person apparently didn't provide me with the right amount of leadership. And so I'm going to help them by leading them to lead me better. And so next time when I come in my approaching to them, I'm going to say, please provide some feedback on this particular activity that was completed on this particular day. And these are the responses that I received from my clients. So then that way, all they can say is good job. So that's that.
That's awesome. Great advice. Ayana.
So Veretta, I'll just be very brief because I know we probably want to move on, but all of us are chomping at the bit to just kind of share a little bit. So Jada, I've been in the exact same situation. My situation was specifically, I'll just share an HR manager who was the diversity and inclusion manager, who shared the very same thing to me. I learned in my work where I was too professional and I dressed too professional. And so to Veretta's point, you asked, handle the situation. I think Veretta provided some really good questions for you to ask. So that's what I was going to suggest, asking specific questions with regard to your performance and the objectives that you and he or she have set for yourselves around the work. But I'm a little different. I'm a little different soul. So I also, in the situation that I talked about, I asked her, again, who was the D&I manager, specific questions with regard to, now tell me, or can you share with me how my dress is impacting the work that I do? Silence. Can you share with me how the way that I speak, how is that impeding my work? And I'll tell you, she could not answer those questions. And again, she was the D&I manager. And when we got finished with those conversations, again, because I'm pretty direct, but I asked those questions in a very respectful way. I wanted her to think about the bias that she had created in her mind, perhaps, or the story she was creating about me, perhaps the intimidation. I was told years ago by another HR VP that I intimidated people because I was tall, thin, and beautiful. And so as a Black woman, when you show up, and I'm assuming, or a woman of color, when you go into the workplace and you present yourself a certain way, there are a couple of things. There are stories that are being told in their head, and there are biases perhaps that you don't live up to that they have. And so to me, those questions need to be asked in order to start to turn the tide on how they're perceiving you and perhaps others. And so I wouldn't by any means let that go. I think Janice gave some really great advice about seeking an external HR partner. Veretta gave you some questions that you should ask. But I think also if you have the bravery to start asking some of those questions and helping that individual to try and make the connection between your dress and your work performance, which they won't be able to do, that will get them to start thinking about, this probably isn't something to continue to say to her. So that's what I did. And that came out of my work review. She was like, well, let me remove that. I said, well, why don't you do that? I think we agree. Get on
awesome.
that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I have put in the chat box too that it's really about work performance and being subjective. And unfortunately, you have a lot of people that want to base stuff on subjective things, not based on the reality of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, which is sometimes can be crazy. We are about at the end of our time. And so I just want to give both of you probably a minute to have your final thoughts, your final swan song. So Ms. Veretta, we'll go with you first.
Thank you. You guys, this has been great. You've been amazing. Just, just your wealth of knowledge and just a ability to be able to apply this. I'd like to welcome you both again as we continue the series. This, I believe, Janice, you said is the last series for the Do You Trust HR, but we definitely have more on the horizon to continue the conversation. We want to hear your questions. We're on social media, we're listening, and we want to be the support for the HR professionals. We want to be that place where you can come to and get a alternative view about things, because this is, much of what we do. I would say if we had to give it a number, 80% of what we do is art. There's only about 20% that's science in the HR arena, right? And that is around the laws and the governances and the ordinances and the, credentials and all of that, that we have to that are mandates. That's about 20%, but the other 80% of it, it really is art. And it's basically partnering with people, coming up with a plan, executing on that plan, and being able to say, this was my business case. I came up with this idea. These are, the areas that I use, the factors that I consider, the people that I brought in, and feel confident that you did the best thing or made the right decision that you can make. So we want to be here to support you and continue to see what we have next going on in our series.
Okay. Ms. Ayana.
Yeah, I'll just echo Loretta's sentiments. I talk about the 5 C's when we talk about culture. One of them is community. So I think that's really what Loretta's talking about, just this need and the importance of having a community of support around you all in the work that you do, as well as you experience the workplace. So again, I'm happy to be a resource for any of you. Feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to just chat with you and be a part of your community. So.
Okay, and then to wrap up, next week on the 5th, we're having the SHRM Black Chapter Presidents. Be on the lookout for that invite. On the 12th, we're having the diverse recruiting practices. And then on the 17th, we're having Own Your Own Consulting Company in HR. So we definitely appreciate everybody coming out today. And please share this information with people that you know that work in our community, and look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.